You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, sponsored by Essentia Health.
It only takes one step, twist, or crunch to know something doesn't feel right. Essentia Health's orthopedic and sports medicine team gets you back to doing what you love with commitment, resilience, intention. We're here to keep you moving forward. Visit essentiahealth.org to learn more about orthopedics and sports medicine, like nowhere else.
Hello and welcome to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health. I'm Matt Wellens, the Bulldogs hockey beat writer at the Duluth News Tribune and the Rink Live.
And I'm Zach Schneider, the television voice of UMD Hockey on My9 Sports.
We're back after a couple weeks off to bring you our last episode of 2022. We want to take a look back at the first half of the 2022-2023 UMD men's and women's hockey seasons and look ahead to what is in store for the second half of the season, which for the men starts with an exhibition on New Year's Eve against St. Thomas at Amsoil Arena. The women, they don't return until January 7th and 8th at Wisconsin. To help us answer these questions, I don't know if he's actually going to help us answer these questions now that I read that.
I don't help with much.
We're joined today by the voice of Bulldogs hockey at KDAL. Welcome back to the podcast, Bruce Ciskie.
How desperate are you to find somebody to sit in here with you guys today?
Well, it's very.
Had to have been a lot.
We're pre-recording this on whatever day it is, December 19th here. We're going to run this in between Christmas and New Year's. Everyone's trying to take a little time off for the holidays, but we wanted to, take a look before we get deep into the second half here. We want to take a look back at the last 3 to 4 months of Bulldog hockey. We're going to alternate kind of between the men's and the women's teams here with questions and get right into it because I apparently came up with more questions that we're probably going to have time for.
Oh, yeah.
We got some reader-submitted questions or listener-submitted questions as well. We're going to try and get to those. Let's just start off with the expectations we all had for these two programs at the start of the year. The men are unranked right now. They're at 8-10 overall and tied for 5th in the NCHC at 4-6. Bruce, you're the guest. We'll let you start. Has the men's team met your expectations, exceeded them, or underperformed to date?
So my initial thought is I actually read this rundown. That might be the first time I've ever done that when I've come on your podcast, so I'm somewhat prepared. I don't know what it's going to do me.
You're stalling to answer this question.
No,
right now.
My initial thought was to say that they've underperformed. And then I thought, they're 2 points out of 4th. They're 4 points out of 3rd. They're hovering around 500. They've been hovering around 500. And they've been doing it while, and I know Scott does not want to talk about excuses, but I do. So we're going to talk about excuses. Just a myriad injuries and illnesses in the first half, significant players missing significant time, more of that apparently to come in the second half. But I just look at it as, I picked them second or third, whatever it was. I struggled to figure out where to put them. I thought they were in a pack of teams that were going to finish somewhere around the middle. They're not that far off. I'm going to say they've met expectations when you consider how young they are and everything they've been through in the first half of the season.
Zach, how about you?
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat. I think they've slightly underperformed, and not by much. And part of it is probably the success they've had as of late. The last 5, 6, 7 seasons have been awesome for this program, and so that sets the bar higher naturally going into a year. And then some of it was the excitement that the coaching staff and the players had about this young group that came in. They kind of sold me on it that this was going to be a super exciting group that was going to come out of the gates, right out, from the start of the season and play super well. And for some of them, they have, and then for others, it's taken a little bit more time. And I think that we have to remember how young some of these players are and that it does take time. And even some of the superstars that UMD has produced over the last several seasons have needed the first half a year, full year to get acclimated to this game. And so some of it might be self-induced that maybe I allowed myself to get too excited about this young group because of what was said about them. And you can kind of see it, though, this last series against Denver. Those young guys are starting to pull in the same direction. And maybe it's been the older guys that have not produced the way that we expected through the first half of the year. So I'll say slightly underperformed, but probably right with Bruce that this is probably what we should have expected.
Yeah, I'm going to say this is kind of what I expected, though I'm not sure. I feel like I prepared. Maybe this is partially all of our fault. As Zach said, there's a lot of hype about the younger guys coming in here. I'll admit I don't know if I fully prepared, in my previews and leading up to the season, fully prepared everyone for the possible kind of world of hurt that UMD could be in for in the second half. I think we talked about it a little bit at the start of the season of, all right, the last time UMD did this, brought in 10 freshmen, plus you have to consider on top of that 2 transfers and a new assistant coach, was 2017-18. And everyone has forgotten about that first half. And that's why I try to repeatedly bring it up. I've brought it up a lot now as we've gotten into the first half here. And I just like a reminder of like that first half did not go well. It was rough. Pairwise, they were probably, NCAA tournament wise, and we'll get into that a little later in here. UMD was in a better position then than they are now. But in the league, man, I went back after that second loss to Denver. I went back and looked, and it hit me because I didn't even remember. They were 3-7. They won only 3 of their first 10 league games that year. It's tough when you have this many new players, as talented as some of those players are, to just jump right into college hockey and make an impact. So, you could go over what players have over and underperformed and such, but as a team, I think UMD is. This is about what I expected right now.
I'm not going to question the schedule maker because he knows what he's doing. He knows how to set this team up for success. But 2017-18, their non-conference included a Bemidji team that wasn't very good. It included a Merrimack team that wasn't very good at the time, a Maine team that was not very good at the time. Non-conference this time around, Wisconsin, I still can't figure that one out. But Cornell is very good. Minnesota State, Mankato, they were a top team. Thought to be a top team when they hit them at that point in the year. Arizona State's a good team. That was a tough non-conference for a team that is as young and trying to find itself as this one. And frankly, they were probably lucky to get out of it at 500.
Well, and I think, you looked at the start of the league schedule and you thought CC, Omaha, those should be some maybe early sweeps they can pick up. But both of those two teams are a lot better than a lot of people. Like those two teams are overperforming in the league right now. And I think initially you look a split at CC, splits against CC look like, ooh, that's rough. But now you kind of look at how this season's gone. And you're like, okay, I get splitting with Colorado College. I kind of get splitting with Omaha. While they only got 2 out of 6 points against Omaha, they got some ground to make up there. But, the NCHC isn't exactly what everyone thought either.
No, and it's a tough league, and you can't rewrite history, but you take away the sticker shock of 3 of these losses, which is the shutout against Mankato, the shutout against Wisconsin, and the shutout against Colorado College. If those are 1-goal competitive games and you played well but lost, and maybe you sneak one of those 2 games against Denver out at home to close the first half, maybe you're looking at this first half completely differently. But the fact that they've been blown out at least 3 times and then haven't been able to win some of those close games where they've played well and probably deserve better, that shifts an entire narrative of the first half. I mean, we could be talking about this team as completely overperforming at this point if 4 or 5 games go differently.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There were some games. I mean, the game 1 at Colorado College to start conference play, embarrassing was the word that Scott Sandlin and company used.
That was the mother of all clunkers. That was bad from the start.
If you don't have a game like that, maybe the perception's a little different. All right, moving on to the women, who are number 8 in the country. They're 13-6-1 overall. 4th in the WCHA at 7-6-1 after they had a tough first half schedule. Have the women met your expectations, exceeded them, or underperformed to date? Zach, I'll let you start on this one.
It's tough to say. The number 8 team in the country is underperformed, but they've only won 2 of their 8 games against Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Ohio State. I know they would like better in that. And then that last game going into break, a tie against St. Thomas. I was such on the verge of saying as they went into the holiday break in the first half that they had taken care of their business that they needed to. They took care of their non-conference schedule. They had beaten Mankato. They had beaten Bemidji State. I think did they lose to Mankato? No,
they had an overtime
tie early in the conference year. But for the most part, they had taken care of the business they needed to take care of and set themselves up to play those top teams. But then that that kind of clunker at the end of the first half maybe left a sour taste in your mouth and pushed this maybe from a meets expectations to a slightly did not meet expectations. But they've got games against Wisconsin and Minnesota left in the second half, but they need to win those games. They've got, I think, 4 against St. Cloud and 2 each against Mankato and Bemidji State.
4 against Bemidji.
4 against Bemidji, 2 against
St. Cloud, 2 against Mankato, 2 against St. Thomas.
Yeah, so they need to basically win all those games to take care of their business in the second half and then see what you can do against Minnesota and Wisconsin.
Bruce, how about you?
Even if you look at that St. Thomas Saturday game and they win that game in regulation, which they should have, I would still say they're underperforming. And I hate to say it, but I do think they're underperforming. They played 8 games against Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Minnesota. Those are their main competitors for where they want to be. And they won 0 of those games in regulation. It's not going to cut it. And I think they all know it's not going to cut it. And they've been close, and that's good they've been close. They've been competitive against these teams. The one game against Minnesota got away from them a little bit. I know that they didn't like how they played in the Friday game against Ohio State. We heard all about that. You and I did, Zach, down at the coach's office before the Saturday game. But the reality was that was a 1-goal game that could have gone either way. I think they're right there, but I can't argue that they've met expectations when they've won 0 games against those teams in regulation time. They've got to find a way to get at least a couple of those here in the second half. And, yeah, I think they're under pressure to win pretty much every other game that they play. Now, they did win all their non-conference. That's good. That will, I think, help them in the end. But they've got to win a lot of games here, I think, in the second half of the season to get to have a chance to get to where they want to be.
I think I would have went with met expectations until that tie against St. Thomas. That's a bad tie. And even Maura Kroll said it after. In fact, she said it before I could say it. She said that it was bad. It was bad.
And coaches don't turn down points ever. So
no, that was a bad tie. That's the kind of result that could keep you out of the NCAA tournament potentially. Now, Bemidji is, St. Thomas took it to Bemidji this last at the end of the second half here in mid-December. So, maybe the Tommies are a little bit. It's a bad tie. Like, it's just a bad way to finish the second half, and because of that, they've underperformed. I mean, Bruce, you're right. Getting swept by the Gophers in Minneapolis, you would have liked to split there, but you got 2 games to make that up yet. You
right.
Sweep the Gophers in Duluth, and you're sitting, pretty good. I thought that was a good split against the Badgers, actually. I'm okay with that result, even though one of those wins was in OT. It is tough to just have the one win against Ohio State, especially because you mentioned that Friday game, but I go back to that Saturday in Columbus. That's a game they should have won, but they made 2 mistakes late that end up in the back of their net there, and they lose that. They've underperformed against Ohio State, I would say.
And it's hard to watch these games that are streaming from the OSU ice rink. We've talked about that many times, and it's tough to watch a game on the computer no matter what the circumstances are. But the games that I've seen pretty much all those 8 games. I think the best one they played was the one they lost in regulation to Wisconsin. I thought they were outstanding that afternoon and deserved a better fate. So, again, it's hard to say that they haven't met expectations, but at some point you've got to finish one of these games. You just do. And with the pedigree that they have, I don't think it's too much to ask.
Well, that's the problem, right, is they've been to 2 straight Frozen Fours. They were in last year's championship game, and it's no longer good enough to be competitive and lose a 1-goal game. It used to be 4 or 5 years ago when Maura Kroll and Laura Bellamy were here, and they were kind of rebuilding and starting a new culture, so to speak. Then it would have been okay. You would have looked at that and said, hey, great, our young group played a good game. We didn't get the result we wanted, but now they have to find ways to win those games because, we've said it on this podcast before. The players won't say it, but we will. This is a national championship or bust type season for this program. This is their chance with everybody that they have on the roster, and they need to beat those teams to do it.
And the Frozen Four being in their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Who is your first half MVP for the men, Bruce?
Can I say somebody besides Ben Steeves? Because that's just too obvious. I'm going to say Wyatt Kaiser. I think this team is 8-10, and they're not 8-10 if it went for Wyatt Kaiser eating the minutes he's eaten defensively when they've had some injuries back there, some guys that are learning the ropes, the new guys that are trying to figure their way through this thing and learn the way that they have to play. He's playing 25, 30 minutes a night on a regular basis unless he's got a virus and he can barely move. So
and then he still plays.
And then he still plays 20 minutes. Yeah. So I mean, I think Wyatt Kaiser has kind of very quietly, because he's a very soft-spoken guy. We've all learned that over the years. He's very quietly held this thing together as best he can in the first half. And without being Mr. Captain Obvious and saying Ben Steves, I'm going to say Wyatt Kaiser's the MVP.
Zach, how about you?
Yeah, it's one of those two guys, right? I mean, Ben Steves has come out of nowhere. He scored a lot of goals in the USHL, so I shouldn't say nowhere, but I don't think anybody expected 12 goals in the first half from him. And Wyatt Kaiser has been incredible, doing what he's done on the blue line. I think Matt Thiessen probably deserves some recognition, maybe as an honorable mention for MVP, because he kind of stepped up. I think we all kind of came into this season. I think Scott said it in his pregame media availability that Zach Schneider, I don't think he said his name, but we all knew he was talking about he had a leg up for the number one job. He struggled to start the year, and Matt's come in and played very, very well and kind of solidified that spot. Zach got the start right before break, so we'll see how that goes into the second half. But one of those three, I mean, yeah, Ben Steves is the obvious answer. Wyatt Kaiser is 1B, and then maybe number 2 answer is Matt Thiessen.
Yeah, I'm going to say Wyatt Kaiser because just consistently, too, across the board. He has been their best player on the ice every night. It's why they're throwing him out there for 30 minutes a game. I mean, when they were out without Aiden Dubinsky, it was Dashke, Gallatin, Kaiser. Kaiser was getting 30. He was making up Dubinsky's minutes. Like, they relied on Kaiser a ton. And yeah, they have had a couple decent performances without him, but he's the guy they need in the lineup to kind of hold that defensive group together back on the blue line. Like, it doesn't appear like that's going to be an offensive blue line like maybe we had kind of hoped going into the year. So if you're not going to be good offensively, you got to be a shutdown defensive group, and that's the guy. Now, I know Twitter just crucified Kaiser for the 3-on-3 turnover against Denver, though when I kind of went back and looked at the film, thought, why didn't anyone come help him on the wall on that play? That might have been a team turnover. Maybe I'm just giving Wyatt the benefit of the doubt at this point.
I mean, the guy played 30-some minutes probably in that game against the number one team in the country, and that was the one glaring mistake that he made.
Yeah, it's 3-on-3,
yeah,
so
I mean,
throw it out.
Yeah.
I think Wyatt Kaiser has definitely been the MVP, and I want to skip ahead. We're going to come back to the women here yet, but the next question was the biggest surprise of the first half for the men, and I think Zach brought it up there. Matthew Thiessen. This was Zach Stejskel's job, the starting job to start the year. He landed in the doghouse after the start against Colorado College on that Friday night in Colorado Springs. Scott mentioned toward the end here that he was hoping to get Stejskel in more, but he had some illnesses, and it sounded like maybe there might have been a little nagging injury or two in there as well that kept Zach out of the lineup. So he wasn't in the doghouse maybe as long as we initially thought. But Thiessen doesn't, and Bruce, I think you're the one that originally mentioned this to me. Like, Thiessen does not have a history of being the guy and starting back to back. He hasn't done it much over his career in the 3 previous seasons in Maine. He's been really good when he's making, maybe one start a weekend rotating. I think Scott was looking to do a rotation, but obviously, he revealed that wasn't possible. Thiessen's been I'm not going to say great. He hasn't stolen a game yet, but he's played well enough. He's been solid enough to win games. He has not been the problem.
No, he's not. And you reference, I went back and looked at his game logs at Maine, and they're scattered. There's not a whole lot of consecutive starts. There's not a whole lot of back-to-back weekends where he's getting games. And, part of this, I think, is the influence of Brant Nicklin, right? He's doing it again, the goalie whisperer. He's finding a way. But this is a talented guy, athletic, 6'3". The coaches always use the term for a reason. Recruited for a reason, this guy got drafted for a reason. And we're starting to see that, I think, here this year.
Well, and good on the coaching staff for recognizing that need. Obviously, when Ryan Fanti went to the pros, there was a need, but they brought Matt in as an older guy who hadn't played a ton and had a ton of wins in terms of success at Maine, but they brought in an older guy who could kind of complement Zach Stejskel, and knowing maybe that he was going to need a stretch of 6-8 games to play in a row, and Zach Sandy, as a freshman, maybe couldn't handle that kind of workload this early in his career. And so the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for going out and getting a guy in the portal for this year that has really resurrected. We say at the beginning that they've not met expectations. Without the play of Matt Thiessen, we would be talking about their tanking expectations. He's been that kind of, he hasn't been amazing to your point, Matt, but he's been good enough to say that he has been a big reason that they're around the 500 mark at this point.
Yeah, and he'll even tell you there's a few soft goals he's let in here or there, but for the it's been maybe 1-2 at the max where there's enough the guys in front of him should have been able to make up that hole offensively. So are we in agreement that Thiessen's the biggest surprise for the men?
Yeah,
team in the first half.
So. Yeah.
All right, let's switch over to the women here before we take a break. The first half MVP for the women. This is not as easy of a question, I don't think. Zach, you could start with this one.
Yeah, it's tough because the expectations on a Gabby Hughes are that she's going to score, 30, 40 goals or, do whatever she can to maybe win the Patty Kazmaier, be in that conversation again and lead the Dogs. Same with Ashton Bell, that she was going to come off that gold medal. Emma Soderberg was in the Olympics. I think the expectations are so unrealistically high on those three that they would probably say that they've underwhelmed in the first half, at least from a statistical standpoint. I think all three have done really good things to help the team win. I'm going to say Maggie Flaherty is my MVP because I think she's overperformed, at least offensively, for this team. And Maura Carolla has talked about their back end, led by Ashton Bell and Maggie Flaherty. They've got, I think it's like 45 points, somewhere in that neighborhood, between the 6 or 7 of them that are dressed every night. And you compare that to other back ends, they're supplementing their offense that they lost from their top line last year from the blue line, and Maggie Flaherty's been a big part of that. So I'm going to say Maggie Flaherty, but I think any of the 4 that I mentioned could probably be a good answer to this one.
Bruce, how about you?
We've talked about this before. It is incredibly difficult to come back from centralization and get back to this level of play and excel. Maddie Rooney was very good when she came back, but she was not quite Maddie Rooney for a little while. I've talked to Nadine Mezerald when they played Ohio State a couple of weeks back, and I brought up Emma Malte with her, and it's the same thing. It's somebody who didn't play a lot in the Olympics and is now playing a ton at Ohio State, and she's done very well. And I would throw Ashton Bell in there as the MVP in the first half. To come back from centralization and not playing a ton of minutes in Beijing, not playing a ton of minutes in the run-up to Beijing. It's a different role. And to come back and play the role she's playing now and play it as well as she has, I think she deserves all the kudos as far as I'm concerned. And then you throw in that when Gabby got hurt in St. Cloud and they needed a number 1 center for a night, Ashton Bell, okay, I'll do it. And she, by the way, did it very well. She played well that day, and I think she's the MVP of this team. There's a lot of worthy candidates. You mentioned a few of them, and you're right on all of them, but I think Ashton Bell is the winner here.
Yeah, I think the one thing also that has been talked about a lot from this team is how much better Bell has made everyone around her. Zach talks about that offensive, the production they're getting from the blue line. Like, this is basically the same blue line as last year, minus Lizzie Norton going off to play for the Gophers. But Lizzie Norton wasn't exactly an offensive, threat or anything like that. She was more of a defensive defenseman. When you ask them all, like, what's the difference? Why is Nina Jope-Smith? Why is Maggie Flaherty, putting up points? Why is everyone on the blue line contributing? And they credit Bell, the influence of Bell on that group, that, her aura and that is just rubbing off on everyone, and it's making everyone better. And that's what you want in an MVP. You want a player that, can make the rest of their teammates better. And I think Bell's been doing that without a doubt. Who's the biggest surprise on the women in the first half?
I say Manna McMahon. I think we all knew she had it in her, but the production she's brought this team, I think it's taken a lot of pressure off of Gabby Hughes as they tried to find the right combinations around Gabby on that top line. Mannon's made a couple different combinations work on that second line. I think she's been very good. She's helped the power play. She's always been good defensively. I think, but I think the production we've seen from Mannon this year, it's been welcome, and I would say she's the biggest surprise.
Yeah, I think that's hard to argue with. Taylor Anderson, I think, has been really good too, because she's been one of the people that's been inserted on that top line with Gabby. And not to make a men's-women's comparison here, but Sam Steele, when you talk about him going on the Minnesota Wild's top line and just trying to find a way to fit in and keep up and just do the things that aren't going to completely destroy the other two good players on that line. That was kind of Taylor's job for much of this first half, was just go up there, try to keep up, keep your stick on the ice when you get to the front of the net. And Gabby's got 20 assists versus 5 goals this year, which I think is opposite maybe what we expected. She was more of a goal scorer than a facilitator in the past, but credit her line mates, who largely have been Taylor Anderson and Annika Linser, for picking up the goal scoring, because you know where 17 is on the ice, and if the other two can start scoring goals, that's going to ease up some of the defensive pressure that Gabby's feeling in the second half, much like the second line, where if they can score goals, Gabby's not going to be gripping the stick quite as tight when she gets out there, knowing that she has to be pretty much the only offense.
Yeah, my biggest surprise is the other line mate is Annika Linser. She's got 8 goals. That's second to Bell on the team right now. Linser had a really good freshman year when she was playing alongside Gabby, and you thought, all right, here's a dynamic duo that's going to impress for 4 years. But Linser's sophomore, and she kind of disappeared there for a few years, fell down the line chart to, that third, sometimes even a fourth line winger. She wasn't relied upon as much. This year, Maura Kroll mentioned that no one came into the season in better shape than Annika Linser. Like, this is a player who is really making the most of her 5th year. I don't think Linser was a player that a lot of people maybe expected a ton of when you looked at who's going to make up the offense from Kleiner and Giguere. I think we've seen it from Mannon. Like, Mannon McMahon's been a rising player through her career, and now she's really hitting her stride for the Bulldogs. Clara Van Weeren, another player. You're seeing these younger players that kind of surpassed Linser on the line chart and on the pecking order of this team offensively. And man, Linser's been good. She's been exactly what they need on that line. She's been strong, physical. That's a really good line that battle. Like, that's a top line that can go up against other top lines and not out finesse them, which is what they did this year. It's a line that can battle. Like, they were really good against Ohio State. So Linser's my surprise of the first half. All right. We are going to take a break and then keep this thing rolling. When we come back, we're going to look ahead to the second half of the 2022-23 season for the UMD men and women. You're listening to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health.
Hey there, my name is Wyatt Buckner, and I'm the host of the Duluth News Tribune Minute Podcast. Hear the most important news of the day, including weather and sports from Duluth, Minnesota, and from around the Northland. Join me and my fellow reporters as we take you through the local news you need to start your day. Episodes are released Monday through Friday and are available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for supporting local journalism.
Hi, I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Explore Superior and Douglas County history with me on Archive Dive, a monthly podcast available at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to the Bulldog Insider Podcast, brought to you by Essentia Health, Orthopedics, and Sports Medicine. They're proud to be the team physicians for the UMD Bulldogs and provide sports medicine care to more than 25,000 student athletes in the community to ensure they can compete at the highest level while protecting their long-term health and athletic futures. Thanks to Essentia Health for their support of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. I'm Matt Wellens, your host, alongside Zach Schneider of My9 Sports. And Bruce has actually been somewhat insightful here. Bruce Ciskie of KDAL.
Plenty of time to change that. Thanks for having me, by the way. I don't think I said that earlier.
All right. Here's the next two questions for the men, or the next question for the men and women, I guess, here. Probably the question I've been asked the most by fans, by my bosses here at the News Tribune, by random people I just interact with when they say, oh, what do you do? Oh, I cover the Bulldog hockey team. They ask this question. My wife has asked this question every week, partially because She's already purchased women's Frozen 4 tickets, so she wants to know if the Bulldogs are going to be there. And also, she's got concert tickets for the last weekend in March, which is the NCAA regionals. So maybe that answers the question right away here. We're going to start with the women because it's easier. Will the UMD women make the NCAA tournament for a third consecutive season? Zach?
Yes. Short of sweeping or at least getting 3 of 4 against Minnesota and Wisconsin in the regular season and maybe beating one of those top teams in the WCHA tournament, though I don't think they're going to be one of the top 4 seeds. But I think that short of disaster, I think maybe they could drop one more of those games against some of the teams we talked about, the Bemidji's, Mankato's, St. Clouds of the world, but any more than one and they're in big trouble for an at-large bid. They could still win the WCHA tournament. But I think they'll take care of their business against those teams, and I think they'll be in, just not one of the top 4 seeds.
Bruce, what do you think?
I think they get in, but like Zach, I think they're gonna, if they want to get to the Frozen Four on their home ice, they're going to have to win 2 games in somebody else's building to get there. Which, hey, they did it last year. It's not like it's impossible. These are these are single games, and anything can happen. But they are. I don't think there's a realistic scenario that gets them into the top 4. I'd like to see it. It'd be great to get a regional here, but I think they're going to have to go on the road and find their way back here for the Frozen Four if they're going to get there.
Yeah. Looking at the pairwise, and this has changed. Like, I'm going to mention the pairwise for these next 2 questions, but I'm going to still put a big asterisk on it. We're looking at the pairwise on December 19th. There might be a game or 2. The Great Lakes Invitational is coming up for the men here. There might be some games before you listen to this podcast. It is still too early to look at the pairwise. You can kind of use it as a guide, but I've always said the best time to look at the pairwise is January. Like, January is the first time you get a real good feel, because then almost every non-conference game has been exhausted. And that's where you start to see, and again, even in January, now you're looking at, all right, what league, how many bids does each league have? Because the pairwise, your non-conference record is a big part of, and your league's non-conference record as a whole is a big part of everything. I don't want to turn this into a pairwise explainer, but it's still early for the pairwise. So don't get too comfortable or freak out with where you see a team at the moment. The UMD women are number 8 right now as of December 19th, which would put them in the tournament. They were like a week ago actually sitting at 11th, but Ohio State got a big sweep over Cornell. So without even playing, that's how the pairwise works. Without even playing, the UMD women moved up. So they're sitting at 8. Now remember, there's a new league that gets an automatic bid. The New England Women's Hockey Alliance, NUHA.
Very good.
I'm so happy I got that right. I thought I was going to butcher that. So that puts the cutoff at 9. NUHA is going to be the 11th seed, and that team's just going to get smoked by someone. I hope I don't eat those words, but that they're probably going to get smoked. College Hockey America Champion's going to get that 10th spot. So you need to get to 9 and hope there's no upsets anywhere else in any other conference tournaments. So the Bulldogs are on the bubble at 8, I'd say right now. But I think they're in a good position. You just can't have another tie against St. Thomas. You can't have another moment like that. They need to, beating a Wisconsin, beating a Minnesota will help greatly, but you drop a game to Bemidji, you get another, bad result against St. Thomas, even losses to Mankato and St. Cloud could knock you out of the tournament.
Matt, at the beginning of that answer, I don't want to turn this into a pairwise explainer.
And he did.
Matt then proceeded to explain the pairwise. This is what I deal with, Bruce, on a weekly basis.
Sometimes when you ask somebody, and I'm guilty of this too, when you ask somebody what time it is, they tell you how to make the watch. And Matt just did that. And that's okay.
He was right about it all, but he said he didn't want to do it, and then he did it.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do, Zach. You know this as a parent.
I was going to say the last thing with the 3 of us want to get into is a time discussion, by the way.
What time is it right now in Newfoundland?
Yeah, don't want to know. All right, so the women, I think we're all confident. I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. They're going to take care of business. That was a trap game against St. Thomas. Last game before finals, you just beat them 8-1. They shouldn't have another game like that.
That'll get their attention enough that they'll be on point for the rest of those games.
Those first practices when they come back are going to be rough.
Yeah,
they're going to make up for not working, playing to their full potential in that game. All right, here's the trickier question. And let me pull up the stats here to make sure I got this right on the men. The COVID year always throws me off with them. Will the UMD men make the NCAA tournament for an 8th consecutive season, extending the longest active NCAA tournament streak? Bruce is looking at Zach. He wants Zach.
Do I have to go first?
I don't care who goes. I'm not going to answer the question anyway. So
I will answer the question. I'm not as big of well, whatever. As I'm not as afraid of Bruce as Bruce is. No, I don't think they're going to. I think they need, at this point, the way that they've played it so inconsistently, short of, going on a big run in the second half. I don't think they're going to get in as an at-large team, and then to win the tournament against the teams that they're going to have to play against. Not only do you have to win 2 of 3, and those might be on the road at this point, then you have to go to the X and win 2 more to get the auto bid from the NCHC. I just, at this point in the year, I think it's unlikely. So if you ask me today, December 19th, if they're going to be in it, I'd have to say no.
Bruce, how about you?
I think the answer has to be no, but I think the question to me is different than this. The question is, it's twofold. One, can they get hot enough to put themselves in contention for an at-large? And I don't know the answer to that because I don't know enough about how this math all works, and I'm not going to learn because I'm too old for that. And the second question is, can they get home ice in the first round? Because if they get home ice in the first round, yes, I know they've lost home playoff series before. I've called them. I was there. But they put themselves in a much better position to win a 2 out of 3 series than potentially having to fly to Kalamazoo or bus to Omaha or fly to Colorado Springs on very short notice. I think if you get to the frozen face-off, anything is possible. We've seen that 100 times in these conference tournaments, these single elimination conference tournaments. If they get there, anything can happen. So those are the 2 questions, and I don't know the answer. I think they can get home ice. I think that's absolutely possible to get home. They're 2 points out of home ice right now, and they play that team 2 times here in the second half. They can get home ice. Can they get hot enough to get an at-large where they don't have to win the conference tournament? And I don't honestly know the answer. I think the answer is no, but I don't know for sure.
You almost certainly have to make the conference championship game in that scenario.
Probably.
Right? Yeah, you have to get there and lose.
And then beat the 1 seed.
Yeah.
Which will probably be Denver.
Right.
Which,
it's possible. And the one thing we've said over the last 6 or 7 years, and Matt brought up earlier in the show, the 27-18 season, that season is proof enough. This program has built its identity the last decade plus, since 11, really, being prepared to play when it matters most. And in single game eliminations, I'm never, ever, ever going to bet against a team that's coached by Scott Sandlin. So if they get to the single round elimination, which is to win their series and get to the frozen faceoff, then I'm not betting against him all the way to the national championship game.
Right.
He has his teams prepared. I don't care if they're young, old, inexperienced, banged up, whatever. He has a way of getting the best out of his teams in those scenarios. And so if they get there, then the odds go up exponentially.
The concern that I have is, well, first off, just how blasted inconsistent they've been, obviously. But secondly, I've said for the last 5 years, I believe a major galvanizing moment in that 17-18 season was the Ledyard tournament at Dartmouth, where they went out there without 5 guys, Tufte, Perunovic, Sandberg, Mikey, and Joey Anderson all playing at the World Juniors. And they won that tournament, playing shorthanded, a little shorthanded on Friday, and then even more shorthanded on Saturday when they had to move forward Sammy Spurl to the blue line after Nick McCormick got kicked out of the Friday game and suspended for the Saturday game. They won that tournament. They brought home that ashtray trophy that still sits in Scott Sandelin's office. They don't have an opportunity for that kind of a moment right out of the gate in the second half. They've got to find that somehow. And then that, to me, is almost the biggest challenge going into the second half is where will that moment, that galvanizing moment, because they're going to have to be one for them to get hot, where's it going to come from?
Your wife's good at arts and crafts, though. We can make him a trophy for that game against St. Thomas on New Year's Eve. If that's all they need is a little motivation, we'll make them a trophy, right?
I had to put my wife into this, but yeah, she's very good at that stuff.
Yeah, tell her to make an ashtray over the holidays, and we'll present it on New Year's Eve.
So I mentioned earlier the pairwise and such, and it's not just UMD. The entire NCHC is in a tough spot right now. And again, it's early, but there's not a ton of non-conference games to go here, especially for the NCHC. They do not have much room to make up here. They struggled against the Big Ten this year, which doesn't help. And I believe St. Cloud has a series against Minnesota. That might be the league's last hope to make up some ground there, though they're going to finish with a losing record against the Big Ten. The NCHC has just 2 teams right now. The season ended today. The NCHC would just have 2 teams in the NCAA tournament. Denver at 4 and St. Cloud at 7 are the only ones in NCAA tournament contention. You got to go all the way down to 21, where Western and North Dakota are tied. Bulldogs are sitting 43rd in the pairwise.
Yeah.
That's a lot of ground to make up. And it's a little odd because you're like, hey, they're 500 right now in non-conference play, with sweeps of Cornell and Arizona State. You know, what's hurt them is the Badgers I don't know what's going on. The Badgers,
they're not good. That's what's going on.
They're not good, but they sometimes win games.
Yeah.
Minnesota State is struggling right now. That doesn't help. UMD has one more non-conference series against Bemidji State to get to 500 for them personally against the CCHA. It's going to be a tough mountain to climb. You know, are they going to get in that large bid? At this point, I'm going to say no. But we mentioned the NCHC tournament, and a year ago they were 14 in the pairwise, went on the road to St. Cloud, swept in St. Cloud, and then won the NCHC championship, beating the eventual national champions Denver along the way. You mentioned they're probably going to have to run into Denver. I mean, we've seen this time and time again with the top seed in the NCHC. Not super motivated when you get into, I mean, you see this in every sport. You know, college basketball, how many times does the regular season champion bow out in like the quarterfinals?
Yep.
And there's the conspiracy theories that teams do it to get that extra rest. I don't think that happens in college hockey. I don't know if it really happens in college basketball, but again, my wife bought concert tickets for that last weekend of March. So if you're going to ask me if the Bulldogs are going to the as soon as she asked me, Matt, are the Bulldogs going to make the NCAA tournament? Are you going to be somewhere that last weekend? And I said, why? And she's like, well, I want to buy concert tickets. I said, if you buy those concert tickets, the UMD men are going to the NCAA tournament, and I'm going to be in Allentown or Bridgeport or whatever. So you better be prepared to find a babysitter if you want to go to that concert. Well, she went ahead and bought the tickets anyways. So
it's a good reverse jinx.
So I'm going to say, I mean, this is how
Adele might be the MVP.
Adele might be the
Goodness,
MVP.
yeah.
This is
Never
how
Make her a trophy.
Yeah.
This is how my family life has worked in my career. The most inopportune moments are usually when UMD is on the road or makes NCAA tournaments. You know, so there you go. I'm going to say the Bulldogs make the NCAA tournament, but they're going to have to win the NCHC to do it.
And that's probably the way that it goes, yeah.
My wife will be very angry when they're hoisting that trophy at XL Energy Center, and she has, a week to find a babysitter at that point.
Well, she'll have time to mentally prepare, though, because she'll know going into the Frozen Face-Off that anything can happen, and probably
I mean, she's
will.
smart, and you're right.
That.
If she's smart, she's already lining up a babysitter for that weekend and planning for me to be somewhere in the Northeast, which is how things go.
I always plan to be somewhere else that weekend, and if I'm home, which hasn't happened in a long time, good, great. I'll figure out something to do.
Yep. All right. Some listener questions to close this out. Listener question from Rick. Was the 5th year of COVID eligibility good for college hockey? Was that a good rule for the Bulldogs?
I think so. I think it's been good for college hockey. First off, you're getting guys a chance to play that want to play, that can impact the program as leaders. As we've seen Tanner Latterroot as a 5th-year captain now, and that's important, I think, to have for a program. That's good for their culture. And it's good for the young guys that come into the college world, because as much as Don Lucia like to complain about 18-year-olds facing 24-year-olds, guess what? You get to the NHL, that's what happens all the time, is 18 and 19-year-olds are facing 25, 26, 35-year-olds even. So it's an opportunity to get used to that kind of a different environment in college hockey. It's on that on-the-job training, which is good, I think, for developing guys for the NHL.
Yeah, it gives a place for guys like Tanner, like Jesse, Jacques on UMD that probably aren't NHL bound, might get a chance at pro hockey somewhere after this year's over. But, those are guys that can have a good impact on a college program. And, one thing that is probably bad for, especially on the men's side, is guys like Isaac Howard, who come in with a world of expectations. And we have to remember that not only are they playing guys that are physically, emotionally, mentally that much more mature than them, but they've had 4 years now in college hockey to figure things out, figure out who they are and the class schedule, the workout schedule, the video, all the stuff that goes into being an athlete at this level. So maybe those expectations for some of those younger freshmen have to be tempered even more so than they did previously. On the women's side, I think it's a fantastic option because it gives those women an opportunity to play against some of the best players in the world, really, because there isn't an NHL option right now for the women. There's pro leagues that are emerging, and hopefully one day will be really good. But right now, the best hockey on the women's side outside of the Olympics is in college, really. And so you're seeing the top players, the Ashton Bells, Emma Soderbergs, Gabby Hughes of the world. To give them another year of college is good for everybody. It's good for them, and it's good for the sport.
Yeah, it's great for the fans to see, gold medalists like Ashton Bell and Emma Malte back in the game, and a lot of Olympians playing this year in the women's game because they can. I think that one of the cooler things that I've been fascinated about oftentimes with this fifth year is academically what a lot of these kids have been able to do, whether it's add on a second major to enhance your degree, or the kids that are going on and getting master's degrees. Like on the men's side, we're seeing a lot of them pursuing that master's in business that who knows when or if they ever would have had a chance at that. I think Nick Swaney is one that mentioned to me that he never would have, that never would have been in the cards, especially for a guy that's going on to play pro hockey, minus maybe some time in your hotel room to do some online classes or something like that. It would have been tough for him to go get that master's degree. On the women's side, they have a couple players who are getting masters of education. I mean, that's huge. That's so valuable. Maybe they're not going to need it early on in their careers. Same with the masters of business and everything. But these are degrees that are going to pay off way into their future, long after they are done with college. So it's the academic side to me for the fifth year, I think is cool. And it almost makes me kind of wonder, hey, NCAA, why is there a way to continue this of some sort? I mean, that's why college athletics was founded, was to give people chances to, play their sport. Athletics was a door into the academics. Man, it'd be great if, kids could keep playing and get that master's degree. So, Twitter question from Ben. Besides improving things on the ice, what can be done to draw bigger crowds to Amsoil Arena this year? I do feel the concessions have improved. We'll get into the concessions in a little bit, because I love the concessions at Amsoil Arena. Everyone knows that. What do you think UMD needs to improve, both in the men's and the women's, to get more butts in the seats? Or is UMD doing everything it needs to, and it's on the fans at this point? Zach?
Yeah, this one fired me up a little bit before we taped this, because this was out on Twitter before we got to the actual episode taping. But I don't think UMD, they're always going to say in their marketing department, and this was started, really brought to the forefront by Josh Burlow and I think Forrest Carr and Brian Nystrom, and those people are doing a good job of continuing it. Now, they'll always say we want to find new ways to engage the crowd and get people to come to the games. So they're doing stuff at the intermissions. They're doing stuff between whistles. Outside of lowering the ticket prices, and I understand if you're a family of four, I understand these are expensive things. And if you don't have the time or the money, or you want to do other things with your money, I understand that completely. But UMD has done a lot of the right things. And when you look at the men's attendance to this point in the year, they're sixth in the country in terms of tickets sold. So I understand that doesn't always translate to butts in the seats. You look around and you see a half-empty building. It doesn't inspire a lot, but those tickets are sold, and those people are choosing not to come to the games. They're choosing, for some reason, not to get those tickets in the hands of somebody who will be there. And somebody mentioned on Twitter that if the teams were better, that more people would come. And that's just simply not true. We've seen the men's team win it twice in the last 5 years, and we saw half-empty games both of those seasons. We saw people booing the team in 27-18 in the first half that we described earlier in this year, where they were, frankly, pretty bad. They booed that team that later won a national championship. To me, this is all on the fans. If you buy a ticket, either go to the game, sell it, give it away, get it in the hands of somebody that will use it. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But the players, the coaches, the staff, and the athletic department, in my mind, have done everything in their power to make these marketable games at this point. And it's anything that puts it on those groups of people and say they have to be better is a lazy argument, and it's an entitled argument at this point. So if you want people to be at the games, go to the games.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, look, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I can remember years, and you were at a lot of these games, Zach, growing up, that they were struggling to put 3,000 people in the deck for significant opponents. So I don't want to hear that 4,000 or 5,000 people in Amsoil is somehow unacceptable. I've gotten to the point now that I look at one area of that building when the game's about to start, and that's the student section. If that student section is there, I know we're going to have an environment. That's all I care about, is I want to have an environment. If the rest of the seats are empty, couldn't care less. If the students are there, great. That's the fact that they're showing up and they've been as loud and engaged as they've been, that's great. The only weekend this season where I thought the environment in that building was unacceptable was the weekend they weren't there when they played Cornell. Every other weekend has been at least a decent environment, and it's been because of the students. And that's what college athletics are supposed to be about, right? Is that student experience. So I'm fine with that. I've just accepted that there's people that buy tickets that for whatever reason don't go to all the games. Whether it's when Bentleyville's in town that they don't want to fight the traffic. There's plenty of people that'll fight the traffic and go to the game. Find a way to get the ticket to somebody who's going to go, like you said, Zach. I don't get that. I've never understood why you would buy a ticket and then not use it.
And this is not a problem at just UMD.
No.
This is a sports-wide thing. And as Zach mentioned, UMD's 6th in the country in tickets sold right now.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. If you want to see a depressing sight, Todd Maluski of the Wisconsin State Journal, when he's at Badger home games, tweets a wide shot of the Kohl Center. Mm-hmm. Anyone that remembers what Badger hockey was like in its heyday under Mike Eaves there, and maybe that's not even the heyday, but from, 10, 15, 20 years back, you want to see an empty building, go look at the Kohl Center. It's weird that people don't use the tickets that they buy. It's the weird, I don't know. Are you making like a statement of some sort, or
and a statement against what? Like, I guess
the economy can't be that bad if there's people that are paying for those tickets and not using them. And again, we see this it's not a college sports problem. It's not a pro sports problem. It's all of sports. Attendance is just down.
It's a cyclical sport. Denver, which won the national championship last season, did not make the NCAA tournament the year before. This is a sport where that stuff happens all the time. Teams go from winning it all to not making it. The Rams won the Super Bowl last year. Guess what? They're not going to the playoffs this year. These things happen. And for anybody to look at a program that's made 7 straight NCAA tournaments, and it would have been 8 if it not been for COVID, and to say, well, they're not good enough to justify my dollar. What is good enough to justify your dollar then?
And that's not even to bring up the fact that, and we could have an entire podcast about this, this singular topic, but that's just the men's team.
Yeah.
The women's team has been to 2 straight Frozen Fours, lost last year in the national championship game, and those tickets aren't sold. Those are readily available. So if you want to go to the women's games and see the product that they're putting on the ice, which is, even though we've talked through this podcast that maybe they've not met quite the expectations that they've had, it's still, they're one of the best college hockey teams, not only this year, but over their 20 plus years of existence. I'd say 16 of those, they've been one of the best 5 to 10 teams in the country. Their product is really good. And so if you're not going to watch the women's games, that's on you. If you're like, why do they only have 500 people there? As you tweet me while you're watching the score from your couch, you can go to that game. The men's game, I understand there's frustration because people buy tickets and maybe don't get them to people that would go. And that's a completely valid point. But that's on the people that own the tickets. They're theirs to do what they want with. But for the women's games, if you want a ticket to the game, you can get one. Go watch them. Go enjoy it, because this is, a really good product that they're putting on the ice. And I just don't think that, people are taking like the self-responsibility that they should have, and they're just whining about the attendance.
And what's the ticket? $12 for a women's game?
I think it's
$12.
Yeah, the women's games. The 3:00 Friday time does not help. But there's academic reasons for that.
Yep.
Maura Kroll, when she got here a couple years in, they weren't drawing a lot on Sundays when they were competing against the NFL. Mm-hmm. Those 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock Sunday games just didn't draw very well. So if you're not going to draw then, well, let's help the students out. Give them their Sunday off academically. Mm-hmm. I'd note everyone in the WCHA has basically axed those Sunday games minus Wisconsin and St. Thomas. And I think most of the league would like to get rid of Sunday games in general. They're just they're annoying they're not great for the student athletes. They got to travel, academics, yada, yada. I get the 3 o'clock Friday's tough, but those Saturday 3 o'clock games, like if you're a parent of a young kid, my son, he's 4. He's probably been going to women's games now since he was, well, I guess the pandemic put a crimp in it a little bit, but so maybe 3 or 4. He loves the women's games. There's lots of room to sit. You got the concessions. He's thankfully a cheap concession kid right now. Just wants some popcorn and soda. Has not discovered the sweets yet at the rink, thank God. But that'll come soon, I'm sure. They're cheap tickets. It's great for kids. It's a great atmosphere for kids. It really is. And when the UMD I get maybe not wanting to go see them play St. Thomas or Bemidji. That can always not be the greatest hockey. It's either lopsided or the Bulldogs are underperforming. But when the UMD women are playing the Gophers and the Buckeyes and the Badgers, that's Olympic level hockey out there. So, all right, we got to wrap this up. We're running long. The last question we'll throw out there, Ben mentioned, I do feel the concessions have improved. Amsoil Arena has the best concessions in college hockey, I would say. Bruce, you travel a lot with me, right?
Well, let's see here. So Western doesn't have them. We didn't really try Colorado's, did we, in the new building? Or did you? Because they fed us in the press box.
Yeah, Colorado's good. Colorado's good. Colorado's decent. It's not Amsoil. I mean, Amsoil is just on there's lots of variety at the Ralph. I mean, if you're looking for the next best
and I was going to bring
contender,
up the Ralph.
But it's not like there's some well thought out dishes there.
Now, I'm the last guy that should be judging food because
Bruce will tell you how good the chicken strips are.
I am as plain Jane as they come for a variety of personal health-related reasons that would take probably half an hour to explain, so I'm not going to do that. But Amsoils are pretty solid. So, yeah, the Ralphs are good. Denver's are fine. But, yeah, it's Amsoils are, in terms of the variety offered, it's hard to beat Amsoil and what they have.
Anyways, the question, what's the best addition to the Amsoil Arena concessions for the past few years?
I've really liked this year the chicken sandwich that they had. I mean, it's just a play on the chicken strips that they put a bun on with some lettuce, but I really thought that was good. And the spinach artichoke grilled cheese is really good as well. Anything I can eat that won't get on my suit before airtime. So the chicken sandwich fits that bill. The spinach artichoke grilled cheese maybe not as much, but if I'm careful,
you're gambling a little bit with
a little
that
bit. But the tomato soup, really made me worried as well. But I maybe look foolish while I'm eating it, but it saves the shirt for the broadcast.
Bruce, what's your favorite addition?
I frankly like that they put chicken on the grilled cheese now. I think that's really good.
It's a game changer.
It really is. The chicken sandwich is good too. Like I said, the variety they offer is really solid, and it's hard to beat that anywhere in college hockey. I give the folks there a lot of credit because there's always something new every season they're coming up with. Pretty cool.
Couple hits and one big miss, which is the hot dogs.
So
those are bad. Those are not good.
I like the peanut butter jelly hot dog.
No, you don't.
But I ate it. But the thing, I ate it once, and I have no ambition to eat it again.
Yeah, that's the problem. You don't like it.
No,
that's
a
terrible endorsement.
Then you'll eat it again.
I love this item. I never want it near my mouth
likes
again.
something and then won't ever eat it again. That's impossible.
I may go back to it eventually at one point. Who knows? No, the reason I haven't gone back to it is so I dinged this sandwich in my initial review, the sirloin stacker. I don't know if it sat under the light too long or it wasn't prepared that right for the tasting. Since then, I have become a big sirloin stacker fan. They make it fresh for you right there next to the same area as the grilled cheese. They make it fresh right in front of you. It's worth the wait. And then the other dish that's been the greatest addition since they've upped the concessions at Amsoil is the poutine. It's just I could eat that. I shouldn't.
No,
eat it
nobody
every
should eat
weekend.
that every day.
It's a great meal. Like I'm going to be at the rink for 10 hours, 12 hours today. I'm going to grab this. It's a lot of calories. It's going to get me through the day. I love the poutine. That's really good. Again, it's made fresh right there. Yeah, you got to wait a little bit, but it's worth it. So, all right, we've run incredibly long on this episode. We didn't get to all the questions I had, but we're gonna wrap it up there. Bruce, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me. Happy holidays to everybody that listens, that watches, that reads, whatever you do. We appreciate it.
Bulldog Insider, the podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and rate us. For more Bulldogs hockey coverage, visit therinklive.com and DuluthNewsTribune.com. Zach, what's the just give us a little taste of the TV schedule here in the second half.
We do not have the exhibition game against St. Thomas on New Year's Eve, so go to the game.
Or listen to the radio.
Or listen to the radio. You can do that. You can do both.
Listen to the radio while you're at the game.
Right.
Is that still
possible?
possible?
That's an old-timer move.
You find out how bad I am.
No, we won't have that one on TV. We'll be back January 7th at the back end of that home and home against Bemidji, and then we got every home game in the second half except for the one that's at home against Western Michigan that's on CBS Sports, and the road series against North Dakota. We'll have that one as well.
Bruce, how can people, when they are in the rink, listen to the radio?
Well, the best way to listen.
It's a little harder. It's harder to watch TV while you're at the rink.
It is.
But listen to the radio.
Well, and the delay would make it really weird.
It would. You would. Yeah. You could either be excited or disappointed twice, depending on what happens.
So it's 6:10 a.m. It's FM at 103.9. If you're not in the arena, you can find us at KDAL610.com. We got the app. We've got availability on iHeartRadio and TuneIn as well. If you got those apps, just look up KDAL and you'll find us anytime there's a game on, because unlike the TV side, we do all the games.
Sadly, you can also stand right below our booths at Amsoil Arena and hear pretty much the entire call, because I've done that before. And if you want lack of atmosphere, when the place isn't rocking, I can hear pretty much every word that Bruce says.
That's not necessarily a good thing. I don't know if
I want the building to be louder.
We want the building to be much louder so to drown me out, because it's bad enough that anybody has to listen to me, but the people in the building paid to be there, they don't have to listen to that.
All right. Thanks to our sponsor, Essentia Health, for their support of the Bulldog Insider Podcast. And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll catch you next week.